In this chapter, we are going to learn how to use web services in building applications. This chapter contains the concepts of XML, XML processing in Python, JSON format and JSON data processing in Python, and concepts of APIs, service-oriented architecture and web services. We are going to take one case study to illustrate the role of web services in building a simple client applications. In order to enable the applications over the internet to interact, a specific data format is required, and in World Wide Web we have two such prominent data formats used to exchange data across internet and web applications. The most widely used format is Extensible Markup Language XML, which is best suited for exchanging structured documents, that is document style data. For more information about document style data, you can refer w3c.org, which gives the complete the format, structure and other requirements about XML. The second widely used format at present is JSON, JavaScript Object Notation. When programs want to exchange a data which is of structure like dictionary, list or other internal information not concretely structured, the programs can use this JSON format to exchange the data. Let us understand the XML format. XML looks very similar to HTML, but XML is more structured than HTML. One example is, for every opening element in XML, there should be a closing element. But if we consider HTML, we can avoid the closing element for the opening elements. We'll take up one example to illustrate the structure of XML. XML document has one root element, always should have one root element. Here it is a person. Here it is a person. Person is a root element, and this is a closing of the root. Then we have a first child, that is a name. Name is a element. This is the entire opening element and closing element constitute a single XML element. So name is the first child with the text, and the second child is a phone. Phone is the second child here, and phone has a text which is a number, and phone element has one attribute called type. Attribute name equal to value. Value is international. The third first level child is an email. Email, which has no text within the element but has one attribute called hide with value s. This is a simple XML having one root element and three child elements, namely name, phone and email. We can think the XML document as a tree structure. Here person is the root, first level, and these are the child nodes at level 1. And in this example, root element is a person and other elements, that means tags, phone, name and email, are the children of the parent person. This is a pictorial representation. Tree structure, we have a person, then a child name, phone, email, and this is attribute hide. Phone has got attribute and name has got no attribute but has a text, and phone has a text. This is how we can imagine the XML document as a hierarchical structure, that means a tree structure. Using this XML, we can write an application which parses the XML elements or tags. Also, we can write a program to extract the text which is found within the element. Also, the values of attribute. Let us take up one example program to display the name of the person, and also the attribute hide of our email. We will use a Python as a language to illustrate the simple XML processing. First, we have to import the XML DOM, document object model, xml.e3.elementary. This is we have to import the DOM for XML, and as is actually used to create an alias of this library. This is a library, and this alias help us to avoid writing this complete fully qualified path in the rest of the code. So we can use, instead of the entire fully qualified path of the library, we can use et. That's why we have used as keyword, as et. And we have to define the XML here. Even you can read it from the file also, it is possible. Here we directly write the XML document and we enclose this XML document with the docstring. You can see 3 quotes here also 3 quotes, and data is a string, docstring, which contains the XML structure, same person with first level children name, phone and email. Now we have to load that docstring into a DOM tree. So this tree is a now DOM tree. Et is represents the library. Et.fromString is a method which takes the XML string, and returns the DOM tree. So tree is a DOM tree. Once we have the DOM tree, we can use the method of find. Again, it takes the argument, the element name. DOM tree represents the DOM tree. Tree.find of element will identify the first matching element, and dot text is an attribute, is actually the read-only property which returns the text. Ultimately, this statement will print CHUCK, the first element, find name, and the text is nothing but this. Now let us write a code to access this value of attribute hide. Again, use DOM tree, try to find the email element, find email, then use a method get with the attribute name. So this get method will return the value of the attribute hide. So ultimately this entire statement will print the value s. So this is how we can process the XML with the easily with the Python library. This slide will explain the different methods used to extract the XML element. As I said, The from string will takes a string representation of XML and returns the tree of XML node, that means the DOM tree. And find function will search for XML element in the DOM tree and return the matches that specified tag. And you can parse the get the attributes value by using a get. So one advantage of having XML tree is it allows to extract data from XML without worrying about rules of XML syntax. So XML in this example is a very simple, but there are actually so many rules to regulate the structure of XML. That means the structure of well-formed XML or even valid XML. So the elementary will not consider all these syntactic and the semantic rules which validates the XML structure and even the composition. Now let us understand how to traverse the XML file containing number of nodes at each level. We'll take up different example. We'll take up the XML file with the root as a stuff. We use a docstring representation. Before that, we have to import the library and we create the alias. Then under that we have only one child called users. So this is stuff is a root. Then we have a first child users, and users tag has got two child nodes. One user with attribute x is equal to 2, one more user with x is equal to 7, and each user has got two child nodes, one is id and name. Let us write a program, the code, to access all these values of users, that is with id and name. What we have to do is, first we have to create a DOM tree by reading the docstring representing the XML using the from string input. Then we have to use, instead of find, we have to use find all the elements user. Since the user is a subchild of users, we have to specify the complete path. Find all stuff is actually the DOM tree, stuff.find all users / user. And if you want to know how many elements are there with user, the length will return the number of DOM elements. So find all will return a list of DOM subtrees, not a single element. It returns a list of DOM trees having the element user under users. Now we have to print the ID and the name as well as the attribute associated with the user. What we have to do is, we have to traverse this list of DOM subtrees for each item in LST. This is a list of DOM subtrees. Use a find method, item.find the name tag text, then item.find ID, the second child within the user text, and item.get of x. X is the attribute of user. X is the attribute of the user. So we get two users, that is x is equal to 2 and with the ID x is equal to 2 and x is equal to 7 with the name and ID respectively. This is how we can traverse the XML file with a simple for loop which loops through the DOM subtrees, provided we receive or retrieve all the DOM subtrees through a method called find all. JSON is another format which is derived by the object and array representation that is used in JavaScript language. And the format of JSON is very similar to Python lists and dictionaries. Here is a JSON encoding, which is encoding for a simple XML having a root element person. So now we don't find a root element person, we find the curly braces. Now person element is replaced with curly brace. Then the first element name is nothing but a key, and the text becomes the value. And second element is a phone, and the value is again composite. Element of JSON. The value is a composite one, which contains the key as a attribute type, which is international. If you see the XML, type is the attribute of phone, and here we don't have a separate representation for attribute. Attribute is also represented with the key value pair. Key is a type and the value, and we had an element number with the text, which is the phone number. And finally email had no text in that, but we had a attribute. So hide is the attribute and its value is s. This is how we can represent the XML in the form of JSON. Note some differences with respect to XML and JSON. In XML we find attributes, but in JSON there is no concept of attribute. Everything is represented with the key value pairs, including the element and element text, as well as the attribute name and attribute values in the form of key value pair. And there is no concept of root element. The element is replaced with the curly brace, the root element. In general, the JSON structure is very much simpler than XML, because JSON has a very simple structure and very few capabilities in terms of representation than XML. But JSON has an advantage that the data directly maps to a combination of dictionaries and lists. And we find most of the programming languages have the concept of dictionaries and lists, and it is very natural. The JSON becomes a natural format to have two cooperating programs exchanging the data in the form of JSON, because the language has got the capability of dictionaries and lists, which directly import the JSON data without any much the programming or the code to parse the JSON. That's why the JSON has become the format of choice for all the internet programmers while designing the applications for web, exchanging the structured as well as the internal data. We can construct the JSON by nesting the dictionaries and lists whenever we require. For example, when we represent the list of users, where each user is a set of key value pairs. So we have a list of dictionaries, and each dictionary represent the user, and the list represent the list of users. How do we parse JSON format? In Python, we have a built-in library called JSON that is used to parse JSON, as well as we can read the data, that is string representation, and then we can create a we can parse the dictionary elements. While understanding this JSON processing, compare the code of processing JSON as well as XML data. Definitely you will find JSON code is more readable than XML, and simple also, because JSON has very less detail. Every information is represented in the form of key value. There is no concept of root, first child, second child, and no concept of attributes and all that. Ultimately, we are getting a list of dictionaries, and each dictionary has a key value pair. This is the concept of JSON. And one advantage is we can get the summary of data easily in JSON without much readability issue, because it is no nested structure. It is simply we represent the data in the form of key value pairs, and the limitation is self-describing. It doesn't describe the semantics which is associated with the data. It just gives the data and the name for the data, no semantics involved. If you want to describe the data in detail, the programmer has to go for XML, where XML provides a way to describe the data in detail. Let us write the program to parse the simple JSON. We will take up the person XML format. First, what we have to do is we have to import the library JSON, import JSON, then represent the JSON in the form of docstring, data equal docstring, and we have to enclose this in a square bracket, because this JSON string is represented as a list of dictionaries. So list is normally represented with square bracket. List of dictionary. This is dictionary 1. Dictionaries are represented with the flower braces. Dictionary 1, dictionary 2. So ultimately JSON has the list of objects, where each object is a dictionary containing key and value pairs. This is a key and this is a value. This is first dictionary object, and this is second dictionary object, which represents the users, user 1, user 2, and the entire string represents the number of users. Now we have to load that string representation of JSON dot loads, and this gives the list of dictionaries. Now info is the list of dictionary. The loads is a function which reads the string representation of JSON and returns the list of dictionary object, and you can now get the number of dictionary objects by using the length function. Length of info will give the total number of dictionary. And how do you traverse this list of dictionary objects? We have to use for statement for each item in list of objects, the dictionary object. Use a normal notation of dictionary. Item of name returns the value associated with the key name. Similarly, item of ID returns the value of ID, and similarly item of X returns the, which is an attribute if you see the XML, which returns the value of X. And if you compare the code to extract the data from a parsed JSON and XML, you will see that we get the Python lists of object with just a statement JSON.loads, and we don't have to use any find, or we don't have to use any get method to access the attribute or to access the element text. Only we have to use the syntax of dictionary item access, that is a index operator, dictionary name with the index operator. This is how parsing JSON is more simpler than parsing XML. We need to have only one function called loads. We don't have to use other functions like XML, find all, get. With one function we can traverse the list of dictionary objects with the for, and we can use a normal common dictionary value access mechanism with the index operator to access the values associated with different keys present in a given dictionary. Thus, we can use the index operator to extract all the data present in the JSON, and we don't have to dig into the JSON data with the different methods. That's why this JSON has become the industry trend by keeping this XML aside, which is more complex in processing. And one more reason is JSON is very simple, which directly maps the structure into the built-in data structures of programming languages like dictionary and lists. This made the internet programmers to choose JSON widely than XML. While designing the applications which interact with other applications, it is important to define and document the rules of communications, the set of rules for interaction between the applications. And these set of rules for application to application interaction called the application program interfaces or APIs. These are the contracts or the set of rules which are to be obeyed, which are to be followed by the applications in order to proceed for fruitful conversations or the spontaneous and continuous communications. Whenever we use API or a contract, the one program defines the set of services and makes it available over the internet for other applications. And in order to make these services available to other applications, the provider of such services need to publish the APIs. That means the contracts, the rules which govern the conversation or communication. For example, the input structure, input data types, and the output structures, as well as the communication mode. Is it a one-way or bidirectional? All that, even protocol that should be used for communication, like HTTP or FTP or SOAP protocol or REST protocol. All those things are present in the API description, and that API description need to be followed in order to access these services which are made available by the providers. When we build any application by making use of such services, we need to search for such services over the internet, with the help of a common repository called the directory, and the programming paradigm which facilitate the publishing of services as well as the consumption of services through web APIs by the client applications is called service oriented architecture, or simply SOA. SOA approach is the one where application makes use of the services of other applications. Means that as a designer of application, we do not have to build the functionality from the scratch. We can borrow or consume the functionalities which are already available or published over the internet. If you think about non-SOA approach, the application need to be built from the scratch, and all necessary functionality need to be coded in the standalone application. And there are so many benefits with the SOA approach. One is the fast development, because we don't have to develop everything. We can just consume the existing functionality by accessing the API. That means the contract or service API or web API. We see many examples of SOA when we use the World Wide Web. Take up one scenario. If you want to book air travel, hotel, and even a car for rental, you will find a single website, for example makemytrip.com, which does all these, provide all these services. And makemytrip.com doesn't have all the data as well as the application for air booking, hotel reservations, and car rentals and all that. And we see data of hotels is not stored in airline providers' computers, or even the data of automobiles or cars not available with the hotel, the servers. Only thing is, the single website will access the services which are provided by the airline providers, air travel providers, and the hotel service providers, as well as the automobile or car rental services. And whenever user wants to agrees to make a hotel reservation through makemytrip.com or even any other single site, the makemytrip.com uses the web service of airline as well as hotel. And if a user wishes to want to hire a taxi, even he can do so by accessing the service provided by the automobile service provider. One advantage is with the SOA is data is not redundantly stored in different providers. It is the airline data is always available with the airline service provider, and the airline service provider is the owner of the data. Only service allows the other clients to access the data. This is a pictorial representation of the scenario. So we have a car rental service, we have a hotel reservation service, and airline reservation service. We'll take up one makemytrip.com one as an example. So this is a travel application, is nothing but a makemytrip.com, for example. This is an application website, and this website uses the existing services provided by auto rental, hotel services as well as airline reservation services. This is the one scenario of service oriented architecture where application uses the existing services which are built by other providers, and the application access or consume the services through the contracts called APIs. Since they are available over the internet, we call it as a web API or a web service. Thus, when it comes to charging through the credit card for a whole transaction of booking of airline, car as well as hotel, still the other computers or the applications are involved in the process. Not only the makemytrip.com or application which integrates all these services, all the service providers are involved in a well sequenced manner to complete the whole transaction. Thus, we can define the service oriented architecture is a architectural style where we have three roles. One is a service provider who will create the service and publishes the API, and second is a repository where the API descriptions are stored centrally for the access, and the third is a requester, service requester or application which requests for a service by looking at the repository and consumes the relevant service based on the demand or the requirement. And SOA has two major advantages. One is you can find always one copy of data, either it is stored in the travel scenario, either it is the data stored, hotel data is stored in hotel servers, and data of airlines is stored in airline server, and so on. And the owner of the data is solely responsible to set the rules about the access as well as the manipulation of the data. And with these advantages, one can carefully should design a web application involving this architectural style to meet the good performance in terms of response, and also should meet the user's need. Moreover, the service level agreements, SLA. When such services are used in the application, then we can say that the web service is being consumed, and we can define a web service as a web API which is published for consumption of service. As an example, we'll write a simple client application to consume the available web service called geocoding web service of Google. So Google has got an excellent web service that allows us to use the large database of geographic information. What we have to do is we have to submit a geographical search string, like for example Mangalore, India. To this API, there is a web API or a web service, and Google will return the best guess as to where on the map we find this place what we had given in the search string, and even it gives the nearby landmarks, nearby landmarks of the place that we have put in the search string. This geocoding service is a free, but only a limited features are free, and the unlimited use of such API is actually proprietary, where one has to pay for the usage. The next slide, we will develop a simple application, client application in Python, wherein a user will enter the search string. Then we make a call to the geocoding API in Python, and we collect the information that is sent from the web service, geocoding web service API, in the form of JSON, and then we display the JSON, the data as it is, as well as we parse it and retrieve the relevant information about uh, the nearby landmarks, like, and longitude, latitude of the place that we have given in the search string. Thus the program takes a search string, and we construct a URL with the search string properly encoded, and then we use a URL library, URL-lib, to retrieve the text from the API, that is Google geocoding API. Unlike a fixed web page, the data that we get is dependent on the search string, and the geographical data is stored in a Google server. We receive the relevant geographical information in the form of JSON from the web service, which is again which is dependent on the search string. Then we use a JSON library to parse, and we make sure that we display the relevant information after extracting the JSON data that is received from the API. This is the program. We use URL library. We have to import that library. We import JSON, and this is the web service API, maps.googleapis.com. This is a service URL API. There is a location of the service which is available over the internet. And now we read the address, string, search string, and if we enter empty, you break, you terminate the while loop. This is for the continuity. You can continuously enter, and you can get the geographic information of different locations by entering the search string. And once we enter the search string location, we append this location to a service URL. This is a service URL. Service URL is appended by parsing and encoding the address, and we pass the JSON representation of this location. So address is a search string, and this search string, this is a key, and this is the value. Value is this, and this encoded URL encoded address is concatenated with the service URL here, and then it is sent through the URL lib request. You can see here we are opening the connection using URL open here, and then we read as if it is a file, entire contents. Since it is in byte representation, we decode it, and now data what we get is in the form of JSON string. It is a JSON string, we can display the length of the data also in terms of characters. Once we have a string representing JSON, you pass the JSON string by using loads. Now JS is a list of dictionary objects containing key value pairs, and you test is there any failure while retrieving the geographical information by checking all these keys. If JS is null or status is also not in JS, or JS with key is equal to not equal to, okay, that means it's a failure. Else you dump all the contents with the 4-column indentation onto the screen. JSON dump.js with the indentation, it dumps all the JSON data onto the screen, and then you access from the JSON parser longitude, latitude and location. This latitude is obtained JSON, this is a results key, and this is the first result, that's the best match, and geometry is a nested key underneath the location and latitude. Similarly, longitude is found with the geometrical location longitude, and we print this longitude and latitude. This is LAT and this is longitude. The location also can be obtained by using the key results. The indicates first result, formatted address gives us the location. We can print the location, and this has to be executed till we stop, because we use the while true. Okay, and you can go on get the information geography. In order to use these services, we need to have some kind of keys, API keys. If the service is free, we don't have to use any keys. If the use is restricted or paid service, then we have to use the API keys provided by the service providers or vendors of API. Why these keys are required? Keys are required to ensure the identity of a person who is using the service and how much the service is being used. That's called metering for the payment. Sometimes you might get a key at once, and you have to use that key as part of post data for the subsequent request. In some other cases, vendor increases the security, and he expects the user to send cryptographically signed messages, digital signatures, or other mechanisms, or maybe other secure mechanisms to ensure the authenticity of the user through shared keys, or even sometimes a private secret keys also. A very common technology that is being used to sign such a service request over the internet is called OAuth. Is one common technology that is being used for signing the service request over the. And Twitter is the one API which uses OAuth signatures for each of the API requests, and there are still a number of other service authentication libraries available, and these libraries are in varying complexity and similarly have varying degrees of richness in terms of security is concerned, security and privacy and other things. And OAuth website has more information about these authentication libraries, and interested can visit the website and can get to know more about the authentication user or service request or authentication mechanism, as well as the authorization process. These are the review questions for self-assessment. Kindly try to find the answers, try to understand the question, and try to find the relevant answers to all these questions. Thank you.